And it is time once again to get solar powered. We welcome you back to the Solar Powered Podcast, where we celebrate the world changing magic of ordinary people sharing extraordinary stories. My name is Ryan Hall. Thank you so much for taking the time out today. And thank you so much for joining us on a, I think, what could be a really powerful episode of the Solar Powered Podcast as we kind of dig in as we're recording this in the month of June, which is Men's Mental Health Month. And I think I've got a really fascinating guest to talk about just that. His name is Michael Padurano. He is the co-founder of a really fascinating company called Inner Luminance. Got a really powerful personal story, really powerful personal testimony about what it means to just be at the bottom of a dark pit and to be able to climb his way out to fight for what he loves. And I just met him a few weeks ago, and I knew he'd be a perfect guest for this program. And he joins us now. Mike, thanks for getting solar powered with us today.
No problem. I almost forgot to unmute. That would have been a very short conversation without me unmuting. I got to tell you.
Yes, it would. Your mouth would have been moving, and nothing would have been coming out.
Yes. Hi. How are you?
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
it's a Monday. It's a Monday morning with my kids home from summer. So let's roll with this. This should be a blast.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, let's dig right in. What is your story? How did you get to where we met, and just kind of tell us a little bit about your background and your story.
I'm 45 now, and there's been a lot of chapters for me to live to 45. So it's right now. It's a daily journey. I mean, every day I wake up and I find the gratitude for waking up and having the ability to impact other souls on a daily basis. I was adopted at birth. I was abused from 2 to 14, emotionally and physically. I was started drinking at 9. I started hardcore drugs at 12. Many ups and downs all between that. I got thrown out of 2 high schools when in 11th grade, so I never graduated. I went into the stock market, did that for 8 or 9 years, did really well basically at that time, and blew it all on partying and losing everything. I've been worth millions on paper many times and have lost it many times. I've been homeless many times. I've been all over the spectrum, emotionally, physically, and mentally. I've had many near death experiences. The journey is very interwoven throughout the whole process. There is no one story that tells it all. What I can say is, I ran and did any escapism I could not to have to deal with my emotional wounds. When I got sober, I found I was addicted to sex, I was addicted to porn, I was addicted to businesses, I was addicted to anything to avoid facing myself. The only reason I got married in the first place is because the woman that I loved at the time, I screwed up because I was self sabotaging and didn't realize it at the time. And she was the instigator, the initiator. And I didn't have it in me because I was sober and all the blame, shames, and guilts came to the surface, and I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror for years. So I ended up in a relationship. I ended up getting her pregnant and I did what I thought was the right thing, which was marrying her. And it just never was meant to happen. Never meant to align, never meant to exist, never meant to happen. It was from day one, it was a topsy turvy mess. It was pure lust and infatuation. It had nothing to do with reality. And I was in it for 9 years. So there you go. That's how that one went. Um, I mean, the most recent part of the story is the most crucial because I was miserable with her. She was miserable with me. I wasn't being a parent. I wasn't being a conscious parent or an aware parent or present to my children because I was so miserable. So after lots of topsy turvy situations, we ended up in Arkansas living with friends. And well, she ended up living in Arkansas with friends. I went to New York to work. That opportunity blew up in my face. I went out there. I went out to Arkansas for the birth of my third child in 2017. I stayed out there until she was a year old, and then I worked out a civil verbal divorce with my now ex-wife. And at that point, as soon as I got on the plane, she introduced my kids to her new boyfriend. We weren't divorced yet. We already had a verbal agreement in place, and she just met him. Within 3 weeks, they moved across the state of Arkansas in with him. And for 20 months, I had no clue where they were, and I had no access to my three children. And I was more of the nurturing parent than she was.
Wow. Wow. I mean, you know, we're recording this on the on the Monday after Father's Day, and just just kind of having those unanswered questions of just what's going on with your kids. I can't imagine how much anxiety and how much fear that was bringing up for you.
So when I left it was June 11th, 2018, which I believe was Father's Day that year, or it was the next Sunday that was Father's Day. I don't remember which. When I left, I pretty much knew what was going to happen. I mean, I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that she was going to immediately move in with somebody because that's just how she was. She never looked at herself, was aware of herself, but I knew that for the first time in my life, I had to choose me. Never in my life was I willing to choose me and willing to face myself. I was so morbidly depressed at that point. I was miserable. I wanted it to end. I had a ton of suicidal ideations. I was just miserable. And I had to choose me. A friend reached out to me and said, "When you're ready for a ticket, let me know. I'll buy you a ticket. You can come stay on my couch for as long as you need." I don't think they realized that was going to be 2 years, but it is what it is. Um, but I was a train wreck. I was a mess. I had so much wounding from my childhood, abandonment issues I never even acknowledged or saw. There was so much depression. There was so much mania. There was so much all over the map because I was just trying to escape facing myself. So when I left in 2018 and I moved back to South Florida, where I was from, I had no access to my kids. I did for the first couple of weeks, but then after that, it was over. On social media, she was posting pictures of my kids and the new guy everywhere when I had no access to my kids. Um, it was gut wrenching. It was horribly written. It was the most disgusting feeling I've ever felt in my life. Um, I started working on myself. I was forced to look at myself. I had no idea what I was doing. I started talking to a therapist. I started becoming more vocal on social media. I started posting videos every day on LinkedIn. I started really looking at myself and how I'm showing up to myself and then in turn to the whole world. At the time, it was about how I was showing up to the world. But what I didn't realize then at that point is how I show up to the world is how I show up to myself. So if I'm not focusing on me and I'm not working on me, then I'm showing the world that I'm not focusing on me and working on me. It was torturous. Days of crying, not minutes, not hours, days. Tears, and I started journaling. I had no idea what I was doing, but I started journaling anyway. Didn't even know that's what it was called at that point. I was just writing and clearing my head out. I started listening to Gary Vee, Ed Milet, David Meltzer, and a few others, and started finding a little bit of clarity in my space. Started reading books and started looking at books. And in June of, trying to think, it was July of 2019, I ended up finding out where they were. My friend went with me. We went out to Arkansas to go visit my kids. I had to call her mother to force her hand to allow me to even see them while they sat in the car and supervised me visiting with them because my kids were covered in bruises, weren't bathed, weren't taken care of, lice in their head, mats everywhere. My youngest had no idea who I was because she was, remember, born a year before I left. So she was a year old, like a year and a week old when I left. So she had no idea who I even was. She didn't speak yet. She wasn't bathed. She looked like a Flintstone character because her hair was all knotted and matty and black and blues everywhere, bug bites everywhere, like just no taking care of whatsoever. And my ex and her boyfriend at the time limited the amount of time I was able to see my kids. I wasn't allowed to buy them anything. I wasn't allowed to bring them anything. And I found out later what I did bring, they threw away as soon as I left. So I brought them soccer balls and toys and Barbies and all sorts of stuff, and they threw it away as soon as they got back to the house. Which again isn't truly surprising based on what now I know is going on there daily, right? Because we only do what we know. So if we're abused in childhood and we choose to react that way, we expect that's how we're going to act toward kids. I was never abusive. I went to the opposite extreme. I wouldn't lay a hand on my kids. I wouldn't even tell them what to do. I wouldn't do anything because I went to the opposite extreme. I hid, completely hid. I had no voice, no sound. I wouldn't even speak really in any way, shape, or form. I was not a present parent in any way, shape, or form. I was a present deadbeat dad. I was in the building, but I wasn't in the space, and I wasn't emotional, and I wasn't there for them from 2010 to 2018 when I left. I mean, I was there in ways, I was emotional and supportive in ways, but I wasn't present at all.
And I can certainly see why just seeing your kid in that state was a real wake up call for you to just wake up and, as you said, you were a train wreck for so long, but just to wake up and face some really ugly truths about yourself. And, I feel like a lot of men out there can certainly relate to this because so many of us are just scared to get down in the dirt of just who we really are, who we've been growing up, so, some of the mess that we've been through, that we've created as a result of that. And we're scared to really get out, just get down in the dirt. And you, by way of choosing to get down in the dirt, to get down in the mess, you chose yourself, but you also chose to be a dad to your kid, maybe for the first time in your life.
So I'm going to pause there for a second, okay?
Sure.
My mother was the abusive parent. My father was emotionally unavailable because his way of showing love was financial security. So I learned that emotional avoidance and disappearing was the way to be. I also learned that being with a strong woman who is controlling, manipulative, and all those different tendencies, right? We can give it any label we want, it doesn't matter. She was living in her toxic masculinity. I was living in my wounded femininity and wounded masculine. So, I mean, you want to break it down really simply, that's the easiest one. I would be lying to you if I told you that seeing them is what forced me to work on myself, because it did. Leaving what didn't force me to work on myself. It's when I realized I had a problem. It's when I moved out of the stage of denial. That when I left in 2018 is when I left denial. When I saw them like that, I had no clue what to do, but I knew I had to do something. So right before we left, my son comes up to me and says, "Dad, you can't leave us." And he started puking everywhere. That's how sick he was to his stomach that I was leaving, because he was holding on to the fact that when I said I was coming back, I was coming back. So when he saw me, remember, they didn't know I was coming. We met at a McDonald's indoor playground. The first thing the boyfriend did with me was put a knife on me and threatened to slit my stomach. I said, "I'm quite overweight, so feel free to try with that 3-inch blade. You're not going to kill me. You're going to piss me off enough that I'm going to hurt you. So be careful what you start. Don't start something you can't finish." And he just looked at me dead in the face and had no idea what to say anymore. So when I saw them and when I told them I had to leave and start fighting, that's when I finally started fighting in chicken shit ways. Truthfully, chicken shit ways. So my kids were in Arkansas. I was in Florida. I went back to Florida. I filed for divorce in Florida, not knowing that it had no weight whatsoever. I figured I lived in Florida my whole life. 2 of my kids were born there, lived most of their lives there, that Florida would have been able to support something. Plus, my ex-wife had child services cases against her in Florida, was Baker acted 3 times in Florida for being out of her mind and wanting to kill herself. So I figured Florida was the best bet. What I didn't realize is it carried no weight. So as soon as I did that, she immediately filed for divorce in Arkansas. Because keep in mind, we weren't divorced still. She just told the whole world I was dead. The school system, the doctors, Social Security, because she put my daughter on Social Security disability. Also, the Medicaid and stuff like that, all thought I was dead. The whole system thought I was dead. Had no idea I existed. So when I showed up, it threw her world into a shit show. So she immediately retaliates with a divorce from Arkansas. I couldn't fight that divorce in Arkansas from Florida. So now this is July or August of 19. So the writing's on the wall for what's coming. I knew my kids were getting abused every day, so on and so on. In February of 2020, my ex's sister and mother sent me pictures and videos of the abuse against my kids. It was like, it was right around Valentine's Day. I don't know what the exact date was. I want to say February 15th, but I don't remember. So it was right around that time period because we were all at my sister's house for whatever that BS Hallmark holiday was. It wasn't anything real. It was a Hallmark bullshit thing in February. So it had to be Valentine's Day. Um, so I still wasn't doing deep work on myself. I was starting to understand and acknowledge that I had serious issues. I started working with a therapist and still just scratching the surface, not doing any real work. Like everybody goes to therapy and just talks and bitches and moans and whines and lives in the victim mentality. Why is she doing this to me? Why is it her fault? Why is it their fault? Everyone's fault. The world's against me. Everyone's out to get me. I'm a father. She's a mother. I have no shot. What am I doing? I'm crazy. I can't get my feet on the ground. I'm financially destroyed again at that point. But then after that trip, business wise things started to fall in place again. I started building businesses with people, started getting paid a little bit again, and started moving forward. When I got that evidence, within 2 days I was in the car driving to Arkansas with $3.76 to my name. That's all I had. I packed for 8 days. I set up a GoFundMe. I got tons of people helping me, supporting me. It's the only way I got through. To the point that I got to Arkansas, my dad got there. He flew in. He said, I'll help you get a lawyer because you need to protect your children. I need to help you do what I can never do for you. It was the second time in my life he ever acknowledged what happened to me. The first time was December of 2019. He said to me, I'm sorry that the abuse you went through, and sat down with me at lunch and said, what really happened? And it was the first time he ever asked me. It was the only time he ever acknowledged the abuse in my whole life up to that point. Up to that point, my house was, don't, what happens in the house stays in the house, but always tell us the truth. So my perception of what even truth was is completely screwed because it was omitting stuff. It was telling white lies. It was leaving the details out and keeping it internal. So I never lived in my truth. I never understood what truth was at that point. I had no concept of what truth was. So I get there. My dad flies in. We hire a lawyer. It's February 25th, 2020. And he says, as soon as the judge sees this, he's going to sign off. It's evident. Look at the abuse. Look at the pictures. We had affidavits from her mother and her sister against her. He didn't file the paperwork till March 6th of 2020. That's when he filed the paperwork. So I got there to February 25th. Every day, I'm sitting in this cesspool in a town I don't know, an hour and a half away from my kids, knowing that they're getting abused daily. My dad's siphoning me $20 a day, which where is that going? I'm trying to eat. I'm trying to buy cigarettes. I'm trying to just be okay. I got suicidal again. I got all bottoming out completely in every way, shape, or form with all my life experience and all the near-death experiences I went through. At that point, it was, well, if I'm going to kill myself, it's going to have to be really detailed because nothing's worked to this point. I overdosed 7 times. I drowned twice. I was beat to death once. I mean, I went through all sorts of crazy crap. So I created this 16-stage plan of how I was going to kill myself. And I was take pills and then walk on a train track, get hit by a train, and also be covered in gasoline. That way I'd explode at the same time. So I had this whole plan. And some stranger from LinkedIn reached out to me and said, everything's going to be okay. I believe in divine messages. I think the person that it comes from is a channel. The person that it comes from is not relevant who they are. It's not their messages. It's divine messages. They're just sharing the message. They are the channel that was available at that time. For a while, I put that person on a pedestal and and I did that to people because I didn't respect myself. I couldn't take accountability. I couldn't be okay. So I had to give everybody else credit for the good and the bad. So March 6, 2020 goes through. I drive the hour and a half. We go pick up my kids. When the cops showed up and they were on my side, her and her boyfriend at the time started melting down, trying to get the cops to manipulate the system because that's what they were doing the whole time. Tons of nepotism, it's a dirty town. There's all sorts of horrible stuff going on there. The cartel moves meth through that town across the Ozarks. So it's their whole big channel. And the biker club that he was in was part of that distribution cycle. So there was a whole bunch of nepotism. There was a whole bunch of all this crap. And I get the one judge in that area that the cartel tried to kill 3 times because he wouldn't bend the knee to them. And that's the judge I get. the one that wants to do the right thing. Out of all the judges in all the world, that's the judge I get, the one that won't back down to them no matter what. Now, my lawyer proved to be irresponsible, reckless, and a douche, but the judge was the savior.
Well, talk about
And
your divine message, huh?
so that was the day that I knew I had to work on myself. When I got my kids March 6th, after coming out of that lowest emotional, physical, mental space I've ever been in, that was a day that I knew I had to work on myself to be there for them. I went out there to save them and I accidentally saved myself. That's what I like to tell people. Now, through that, I was stranded there for 19 months fighting for them because within a week, COVID started. So everything got shut down. And I was in small town USA, a town of 8,000 people, where the judge was in that courtroom 3 times a month, 3 times a month, because he was rotating between 6 different cities. So it was
Right.
some months it was 4 times a month, some months it was three, depending on which month it ended up being. So this is the reality. Every time that it had to be continuous, there was 5 months in between. The judge never even saw the evidence because my lawyer never turned it in. The pictures and the videos. He wanted to hand it to him in the courtroom. And he goes, excuse me, you know better than this. You're supposed to turn them in 24 hours above so the other side can do whatever. And the judge never even saw it. Never even saw the pictures and the videos.
Wow.
So there was a whole sorts of up and down emotional torment during that time. Now, during that 19 months, I worked with a total of between 40 and 50 coaches, therapists, coaches, guides, whatever you want to call them, Sherpas, 7 shamans, a couple priests, and a rabbi. I mixed it all up, right? I wanted to learn as many modalities as possible. I also found out about audiobooks because what I never realized was I'm audiological. So I absorb information audiologically. So reading gives me headaches and migraines, but if you give me audiobooks, I was consuming 40 to 50 books a year instantly and memorizing them by the third time I listened to them. So I went through all sorts of stuff. And then I realized from all this and my business savvy with being the millionaire numerous times, having government contracts, working with the United Nations, doing all the crap that I've been able to build but never follow through with because of self-sabotage, to start building coaching programs from all the modalities, bringing them together and creating my own way of being and showing the world that it's infinite possibilities. You have to be able to pick and choose what works for you. There is no one way to do anything. We're living in limitlessness, but we limit ourselves by the words we use, how we talk about things, all these different things. I can go on tangents all day about this. Manifestation is a limiting word because it's what your mind can imagine, but that's not limitless. Our mind is human. So if you want to tap in, then you want to be a creator and open to what anything that is possible rather than fixating on one thing. I give this analogy. You could be asking for the 6-figure a year job and get the lottery number 6 times and never look at them because you're focused on the 6-figure a year job when the universe is trying to hand you the lottery. You're so fixated because we're human beings.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, obviously, but two things that I wanted to bring up. First of all, is you have that moment, and I feel like so many men don't have that moment when they're in crisis, when they're, when they see their lives just completely falling apart. So many men, you have that choice point of, do I want to continue feeling sorry for myself? Do I want to continue feeling like I want to step in front of a train or, light myself on fire? Or do I want to make those changes? Do I want to do the hard work? Do I want to do the scary work to fight for yourself and also fight for the things that you love the most?
So,
And I
and
feel like,
again,
yeah, go ahead.
but let me just pause you there. I still didn't choose me. At that point in time, it was a stranger seeing me at my most vulnerable space and acknowledging what I was going through. That is what it took for me to realize I was worth it. It had nothing to do with the individual, had nothing to do with me seeing it for myself. But all you need is one person to say, I see you, and everything changes in your life. You want to be seen, heard, and valued. I had no value. I didn't see myself. I didn't listen to myself. I didn't do any of those things. It was the one person that just happened to be a specific person at that time that reached out to me. Again, I put her on a pedestal, and no one could live in the pedestals. Pedestals shouldn't exist. But it was, I set everything up for failure that way. Again, self-sabotage. But it's I, I still didn't choose to fight for me. It was because I was sharing on social how rough my situation was. She felt the pain through me, through my video, and felt the compelled to reach out to me. It wasn't even a first connection at that point. It was a second connection. And she reached out through DMs and said, I'm sorry what you're going through. I feel your pain and everything's going to be okay. And that was all it took. And then from that point forward, that was day 11. The next day, I got my kids in the emergency order. And then once I had them, saw the bruises, saw the lice. My daughter had holes in her head, in her scalp, bleeding. That's how bad the lice were. So, like, from seeing all these things, still living in those the stigmas of fears. I'm a man fighting for my kids. She's the mother, taking your kids away from a mother. I'm in the Bible Belt. I'm an outsider, like my cousin Vinny coming into friggin' wherever the hell he went. Same concept, right? Because I stuck out like a sore thumb in that area. So it was all the fear still running through my head, but I had nowhere to go but forward at that point. I had my kids. My youngest had no idea who I was, didn't speak to me for the first 2 weeks because she had no idea who I was. And then after watching the older two finally start trusting me again, because my son, who got the worst of the abuse, every time a motorcycle misfired, he would shit his pants. Literally, it didn't matter where we were because they were in the biker club and that's what he was around. So that was a huge trigger for him. So once she saw the other two start trusting me, start realizing I was staying for good this time, I wasn't leaving them because child services had 11 open cases, took them out of the house once, but said, we're dropping you right back off. What do you want to share with us? But we're going to drop you right back off.
Well,
So it wasn't as simple as that switch flipped. It was as simple as I started to take it one step at a time. And there was ups and downs through the whole process. There were times I wanted to give up and walk away, many times. I mean, whatever businesses I created going into that COVID time, lost it all. I was owed almost $250,000 going into it, lost all that. And I'm living out there on the same $3.76 I started with in a GoFundMe and family and friends supporting me. It wasn't really to start able to make money or do anything because I had 3 kids that were literally so abused and so traumatized that they were reactive and they were freaking out and they were taking it out on me, trying to see if I'd leave. They went into reactive attachment disorder behaviors. So not only was I there, but then that was triggering me because I never worked on myself. So every action created an equal reaction from me. I was still flying off the handle. I was still losing my shit. I was still screaming. I was yelling. I never hit him, but I yelled. I screamed. I freaked out. And it took time. It took time. Lots of time for me to understand myself and them. I couldn't be there for them until I was there for myself. And that's when I really went deep into that journey of digging as deep as I humanly can.
well, yeah, that's a very, very powerful statement. That is a very powerful statement. And, just I cannot imagine the anxiety. I cannot imagine the fear. I cannot imagine the worry that could bring up. And yeah, it's just an incredible I think an incredible testimony to just the power of choice.
So, or stubbornness, right? Because I
Or
always say
yeah,
I was stubborn. I was stubborn enough not to give up until I started believing in myself to stay, right? Because that's the reality. I was just too damn stubborn. I wasn't going to walk away from my kids again. If the boyfriend in the cartel or whoever wanted to kill me, then they can kill me. That's how they would get me away from my kids. But I wasn't leaving ever again. I already lost everything. I drove my car. I had 8 days worth of clothes. I started exercising. I lost 60 pounds in that 19 months. I got healthier. I started going to doctors again after I stopped going to doctors. Like, I mean, all these things started to shift. And I started really focusing on self and my version, what I call spirituality, which is the journey of self understanding. That's how I define spirituality. And through all the shamans I worked with, the priest, the rabbi, all those different people I worked with, it was, and all the different coaches. I was ordained by two of the shamans, but I will not use the label because I hate the label. I don't live that life. I like my delivery food. I like my cigarettes. I like air conditioning. I don't live in a jungle. I don't live the life. I'm not staying. I'm not going to use it. I don't like labels. I'm very opposed to any of them. I also don't like the word coach because to me that's an authoritative position, which is just more trauma responses. Why do I have to have authority over anyone else? I'm a guide. I stand side by side with people. I guide them through their own process based on my relatable experience. I just happen to create a program around my relatable experience based on the tools I created from my home process.
Which I think leads me beautifully into, let's talk about inner luminance. Let's talk about just what this, what your journey, what your story, what your adventure kind of led to. Talk about that a little bit.
Inner luminance is the accumulation of my whole life to this point. The goal is to guide people towards their inner light and rediscover what's already within them. We all have it within us. We just get pulled away from it. We get distracted from it. We get disconnected from it. We get programmed to be away from it. And I'm not going into that whole matrix crap and all this different programming stuff. The reality is, programming is how you're raised. Programming is what you're taught in school. Programming is anything that disconnects you from self. Anything is programming. Because the only goal in this life is to connect to self. Because once you're connected to self, then you can connect to everyone else. Until you're connected to self, you can't connect to anyone. I don't care what anybody says. But it's a journey. It's an individualized process. I can't do it for them. I don't know any better about their life than they do. I just guide them through steps and process so that they can make their own steps. I don't need somebody telling me I'm the best coach in the world. I just need somebody to understand that I'm there for them and I guided them to doing it for themselves. My goal is to give gifts that nobody can take away. I want to inspire others to be self-inspired. I want to empower others to be self-empowered. The gifts that nobody can take away unless we give it away. It's not about me.
Nope. It's not about you, and it's not about us. It's about the people that we work with. It's about the people that we guide to be able to just simply put, to take their pen back to write their own story of their own life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm to the point now where, even this week, coming into this week, I have a lot of stuff going on with Inner Luminance. We're doing amazing things. We're now part of GD's neural network, which is building this whole multi-leveled platform. He's a neuroscientist that's bringing all pieces together. He's included Inner Luminance, one of our programs, in it. And he's a neuroscientist that's going to do studies and research and white papers behind the program, as well as he's building a virtual school to help people with reentry and help people with all these different things. And he believes that before they move into the educational stuff, the certificate programs and all those things, that they need to create a new way of life. And that's what Inner Luminance is really doing. Is it takes you through the 4-stage process. Sorry, got an itch here. Can't get rid of it. The water's not even working. So the 4 phases of Inner Luminance, which is what I think really separates us from almost everything I've ever seen. Step 1 is awareness. Phase 1 is awareness. And awareness is super dirty when you first move into it because you see the piece of shit that you really are. And nobody likes talking about that. Nobody likes discussing that. But it's true. When you see the shitty things you're doing in your own life, it sucks. It's easy to turn around and say, I don't want to be aware anymore, and I'm going to run from it. Then phase 2 is acknowledgement, which is a deeper understanding of why we are the way we are. And moving into a space of unconditional self-love and compassionate self-awareness. Phase 3 is acceptance, which is letting go, really moving forward from the past. And step 4, which is what I think is the real separator, is allowance. Allowing ourselves to write a new way of life. Gives us the tools, shows us how to apply them, has new tools, new steps, new everything to really create that new way of being. Because that's what I feel like most programs, most things are missing. They get you to a point of healing. They give you tools. They give you all these things. They do just enough to make you codependent. I want to make everybody interdependent. I want everybody to have the toolbox that they can go live their own life, and I never need to see them again. Now, if they need me, they can always reach out. But I need them to be interdependent so that they want to inspire others just by being themselves. There's 8.1 billion people in this world to reach. I keep the same 6 customers for 20 years because I keep adding steps to the program. I might be able to live okay, financially okay, but what good am I doing to the world? It's not why I'm here. I'm here to elevate humanity through knowledge and understanding. Humanity is a really big group. It's 8.1 billion. Can't have the same 6 clients. So I've created these programs, and there's a corporate one, there's the individual one, and now we're going to be using them to really impact humanity. Dr. Roz Jeeds has now joined my company. He's now chief neuroscientist and chief researcher on Inner Luminance. We're starting a newsletter that we're going to be dropping monthly. We're starting a podcast that we're going to be doing monthly. And we're really going to be focusing on the mental health, the advocacy, and the education. Because before you can really move into knowing what you even want to do in life, you've got to, one, believe it's possible. So you can't believe it's possible if you're stuck in your past. And with the ACEs exam that goes around, that they throw around all over the country through corporate America, that nobody knows what to do with the results, they know what to do with it in prison because they say if you have 8 or more out of the 10, that you're going to a lifer in prison. So they know what to do with it in prison. They keep you there forever. But if you're just a normal person, which they say over 80% of adults in America alone have unresolved trauma in their life, which means everybody's living in trauma-based reactive behavior. So the way that I explain it is we're going to take you from a reactive state to a responsive state. We're going to give you that pause in between. You're going to be able to be compassionate, self-compassionate, self-aware, self-understanding, and break the pattern by taking that pause. That was a lot of words in like 10 minutes.
Impressive too. Impressive. But I think before we wrap up here, just one more thing that I wanted to add is that I'm a firm believer that people's stories can change the world. You can take your darkest, you can take your, all of the pain and misery that you've gone through, and you can either wallow in it, you can either swim in it, or you can use it to create something really powerful. And that's what I think you're doing with this program. And that's what I think you're doing, honestly, with your family. And I think that should be applauded. And I think that should be, commended because it took a lot of guts to do what you did. It really did.
And it's still not over because I fought the school district for 11 months for my son. I had to sue them. My father died in the meantime from terminal cancer. I went to go take care of him for 6 weeks. Came back with COVID. Then after my father died, came back from that. I almost lost everything because I was waiting on the inheritance to cover my butt because my son was home from school for 11 months while fighting the district. Then I had my major stroke. And and it was a triple stroke. It was a major stroke, triple stroke. 86% chance I'd be a vegetable for the rest of my life, which apparently I'm not because my mouth doesn't stop. So I'm good. But yeah, look, life is what we make it. We are limitless. The only things that control how limited we are our beliefs and our thoughts. And our beliefs are built off our thoughts. No, our beliefs are built off our words. So the words we use are so important, and we are so reckless with the ones that we use. But that's where compassionate self-awareness comes in and unconditional self-love. And you have to label it that way because everything has conditions today. You lose weight, I'll love you more. You get a better job, I'll love you more. You do this, you get this girlfriend, I'll love you more. You do this, I'll do that. You go to school, you get this degree, you get this thing, I'll get you a newer car, or a better car, a bigger house. It's all conditional. And that's how we set our kids up to believe it once we don't believe that. We live the example. The whole thing of do as I say, not as I do thing that my parents had when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s doesn't exist anymore. They're too damn smart for that. My kids are way too damn smart. But what I can tell you is if my 6-year-old sees me in a mood, sees me frustrated and upset, she'll say, hey, Dad, go meditate, go journal, go do a self-forgiveness letter. My 6/7-year-old has no idea what those things are, but knows, well, she's 7 as of last week, but she knows how they impact me. And I'm transparent about the trauma I've been through, the self-created crap I did, everything I've done. because you're right. Those stories is what gives others hope. It shows what's possible for the world. My kids now know there's healthier ways to heal. My son says to me, he's the one that went through the worst of it, and he's the one that reacted the worst from it. And he's the one that I kept home from school for 11 months and all these different things. He says to me, "Hey, Dad, are you proud of me that I haven't gone into drugs or smoking or alcohol or any of those things that you did by now? Because I started drinking at 9, doing hardcore drugs at 12. He just turned 12. And he goes, I'm choosing to heal through my stuff." This is a 12-year-old boy. And he said, I am choosing to heal through. Live the example. Words are shit. We are our actions. We are not the words that we spit out unless we align the two.
And I think that's a beautiful place to stop, a powerful place to end this conversation. Be the change you wish to see in this world. That
100%.
I couldn't agree more. Mike Padurano, this has been a truly powerful conversation. You've got a powerful story, and I really hope our listeners and our viewers can take away that value of just really seeing like their own stuff for themselves. How can people find you online? How can people work with you?
I'm the only Michael Padurano on the whole planet. So if you spell my name right, you're going to find me. LinkedIn is the easiest way. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I have a profile on Facebook. Never really use it. On Instagram, that I go to more regular than Facebook. Um, really, LinkedIn is the best way. My website too. Sign up for the newsletter. It's free. It will be there. It'll come out once a month. Where all the whole team's going to be sharing parts of their story. Dr. Raz, the neuroscientist, is going to give his perspective, insights as well, the scientific side. I'm going to give my perspective, insights from the healing journey. So, I mean, it's just going to be a beautiful thing.
I love it. And I'll include links to all that stuff in the show notes. Michael Padurano, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for listening and watching the Solar Powered Podcast. For more information about me, you can find me at royalheartsmedia.com. You can follow me on the social media machine at Royal Hearts at Ryan Hall Writes on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or just shoot me an old-fashioned email at royalheartscoaching@gmail.com. But that'll do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Ryan Hall saying thanks for listening. So long for now, and go get solar power.
Thank you very much.